There's a massive global battle happening every single day, but it's one you probably won't see in the headlines. We're talking about the relentless fight against what we call tropical diseases. And believe me, the scale of this is just staggering.
Okay, let's just start with a number. And it's a number that's almost hard to wrap your head around. 1.7 billion. Yep, that's more than 1 in 5 people on this planet who are either affected by or at risk of these diseases. I mean, that is the kind of scale we're dealing with here.
So, what's the invisible enemy here? What is this threat that connects all those people, all 1.7 billion of them, across different continents? Well, it's a really diverse group of diseases that have one thing in common. They absolutely thrive in the warmest parts of our world.
All right, so if we're going to understand this fight, we've got to know exactly what we're up against, right? So, what exactly is a tropical disease?
Fundamentally, it really just comes down to geography. We're talking about diseases that just flourish in that warm, humid band that circles the Earth's equator, the tropical belt. And the causes? Well, they're all over the map. Everything from viruses and bacteria to parasites and even toxins.
But here's the thing you have to understand. These are not just medical problems. No way. They are deeply, deeply tangled up with climate. That warmth and humidity create the perfect breeding ground for carriers, like mosquitoes. And they're also what we call diseases of poverty. They hit the absolute hardest in communities where things like healthcare and sanitation are at their weakest. Okay, so we know what they are, and we know where they thrive. The next big question is, how do they get around? How do they spread? Understanding these pathways of infection is absolutely critical.
Let's take a classic example, something like malaria. Its spread is this vicious, vicious cycle. It all starts with one bite from an infected mosquito. That's it. Suddenly, the human who got bit becomes a walking reservoir for the parasite. So the next mosquito that comes along bites them, picks up the parasite, and then the cycle just keeps going. It's this relentless, self-perpetuating engine of disease. But hey, it's not all about mosquitoes. The ways these things spread are actually incredibly diverse. You've got diseases that travel through contaminated water or even soil. Then you've got others, like leprosy, that spread through direct human contact. And what that means is each and every one of these routes requires a totally different playbook to fight it.
Okay, this whole global battle can feel a little abstract, so let's bring it down to earth. Let's zoom in on one country that is right on the front lines, a place that is absolutely central to this fight: India. And you immediately see why India is so critical when you look at the numbers. I mean, it's staggering. For several of these big tropical diseases, the country carries a huge chunk of the world's cases. We're talking about roughly half of all new leprosy cases, about a third of all rabies deaths, and 40% of the burden for lymphatic filariasis. So it's pretty simple. Winning the war in India is absolutely essential to winning it globally. And don't think for a second this is some ancient problem. The challenge is huge, and it's happening right now. Just look at dengue fever, a disease that loves cities. This isn't some historical plague we're talking about. It is a full-blown modern urban crisis. In just 1 year, 2022, India reported over 233,000 cases. Just think about that.
But, and this is a really important but, right in the middle of all these massive challenges, some truly incredible victories are being won. For example, after decades of hard work, India actually hit its target for eliminating Kala-Azar. This is a really deadly parasitic disease, and they effectively eliminated it as a public health problem. It's just amazing proof that even the toughest, most entrenched diseases can be beaten.
And this really gets to the heart of the matter. This whole thing is like a war being fought on multiple fronts at the same time. On one hand, you have this monumental, historic achievement, an 85% drop in malaria cases. That's incredible. But at the very same time, you've got other diseases like dengue and chikungunya that are just surging, often because our cities are growing so fast. All right, let's pull the camera back out, because what's happening in India, that mix of incredible progress and really tough, persistent challenges, that's basically the story of this fight all around the world. And you can see this unevenness so clearly if you just look at the tale of two diseases. On one side, you have guinea worm. This is honestly one of the greatest public health stories ever told. We went from 3.5 million cases down to the brink of total eradication. It's almost gone. And then on the other side, you have dengue fever, which has just exploded. It's increased 30-fold in just the last 50 years. See what I mean? Success and setbacks, side by side.
So what's the plan? What's the global game plan to tackle all this? Well, the World Health Organization, the WHO, has laid out this incredibly ambitious roadmap. And the core goal, the big headline target, is to cut the number of people who need treatment for these diseases by 90% by 2030.
But look, hitting a goal like that is a massive, massive challenge. You've got hurdles everywhere. The diseases themselves, the pathogens and the vectors, they're getting smarter. They're developing resistance to our best drugs and insecticides. Then there's the money. There's a funding gap estimated at $1.7 billion every single year. And on top of all that, the programs on the ground are constantly getting disrupted by things like conflict and, well, as we all know too well, global pandemics.
Okay, so let's wrap this up by looking forward, because the 21st century is really changing the rules of the game here. It's bringing new threats to the table, for sure, but it's also giving us incredible new reasons for hope. So on the threat side, there are three big modern forces that are kind of like accelerants. First, you've got climate change. It's literally expanding the map for these diseases, letting disease-carrying insects move into new areas where they couldn't survive before. Then there's globalization. A disease can hop on a plane and cross the planet in less than a day. And finally, urbanization. All our rapidly growing cities are creating these perfect, densely packed environments where an outbreak can just spread like wildfire.
But science and technology are fighting back. And they're fighting back with tools that honestly would have sounded like pure science fiction just a generation ago. I'm talking about things like gene-drive mosquitoes. Basically, genetically engineering mosquitoes so they can't even pass on malaria. We have new diagnostic tests that give you results on the spot. We're even taking that same mRNA technology that gave us the COVID vaccines and aiming it at tropical diseases. This is where the real hope is.
And that all brings us to the final and maybe the most crucial question. Look, the fight against these diseases has given us some of the greatest triumphs in human history, no doubt. But the threats are evolving, they're changing, the stakes are getting higher. So, with a planet that's getting warmer and a world that's more connected than ever, are we really ready for what comes next?